Good evening and welcome to Connecting Point. I'm Jim Madigan. There have been accusations of massive voter fraud in last year's elections. I asked Springfield Election Commissioner Gladys Oyola to come and give us her view on that and to talk about the efforts that are made to ensure fair and legal voting.
Honestly, my sense locally, it doesn't happen. And on a national scale, looking at the numbers that were coming out recently in the press, 3 million, 5 million, I just can't see where that's even possible to deliberately, actually fraudulently vote, have 3 to 5 million people fraudulently vote. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up.
It really would be, and we'll go through some of the process and procedures a little bit with you, but it literally is not an easy thing to do, to go into a polling place and misrepresent yourself or who you are. And that's what we're really talking about, I guess.
Correct. Well, I mean, and I think a few of the terms that have been thrown around are, duplicate voter enrollment, people who are not citizens registering to vote and then actually voting. So the process itself to, let's say, have those 3 million people be registered and then go out there and physically cast ballots on election day, it doesn't wash.
And I know when I first called you to say, would you come in and talk about this, one of the things you said to me, you said, hey, I want to do everything we can to get more people to come out and vote, a higher percentage of the registered voters.
And that's what we do every day. We make sure that we put out the most information possible so that people know when the elections are, so that we get people excited about the process. And having them, kind of now look at the fact that people are saying that there are fraudulent votes being cast there, it puts extra work on each of the cities and towns locally and across the country.
Let's talk about one of the things the Trump administration cited was a national study a few years back that basically said they found problems with voting rolls and voting records, in that maybe people who had moved away from a community or people who were deceased were still listed. There wasn't any evidence anyone was voting as those people. But is that difficult? I mean, you don't get any better budget situation in your office than any place else in government these days. So staffing and keeping up with records while you're trying to do everything else for every election that's coming at you can be hard.
Correct. We do all we can here locally in Springfield to make sure our records are as up to date as they can be. But one of the things that we do come across are people who are registered in several cities and towns in the state of Massachusetts. Luckily, the Secretary of State, Secretary Galvin, works very closely with all of the different municipalities to make sure that we get duplicate notices. If someone is registered in Holyoke, for example, and then they move to Springfield, we'll get a notification. Holyoke gets a notification so that we can update our records. And we are also participating in the interstate voter cross-check, so that if someone is registered in North Carolina and in Springfield, Massachusetts, we do get notification of that. And we make sure that we try to keep as best an up-to-date record as we can. But if they're not casting ballots in those two states or in those two cities, then they're not really committing voter fraud. Mm-hmm. To have your name on 2 rolls at the same time doesn't mean that you're committing voter fraud, which I think is
you actively go in, vote in state A, and then hop in the car on election day and run to state B.
Correct.
Okay. What literally is the process if someone comes into the polls? And a lot of times your poll workers, they know their neighborhoods, and I realize it's tough for the bigger community, but for whatever reason, something doesn't feel right. The person says, I'm so-and-so from such and such a street address, and it doesn't feel right, or whatever. What happens then? What's the process?
Sure. I like to say that Springfield's kind of like a big little city, in that we have a big population, but we know who our voters are. What we do to kind of, from the first part, is that we recruit poll workers that live in the neighborhoods. So if you, Jim, live in this certain neighborhood, we tend to put you where you live because you know your neighbors, you know the community that votes there. And so if I go on election day and I say that my name is Mary Smith, I'm here to vote, this is my address, because when you check in by address and by your name. And if I find your name on the list and there isn't any need for me to check IDs, in the state of Massachusetts, we don't check IDs on election day. The poll worker will check the name off and they can cast a ballot. So it's as simple as that. as far as the voting process goes itself. Now, if I have the sense that the voter isn't who they say they are, if somewhere on the rolls it's saying that I should check the ID and the voter does not have an ID, then they're still allowed to vote, but they get to cast what's called a challenge ballot. And that, as a poll worker, I can say there's something off here about this situation. I will allow you to vote, but what I'm going to ask you to do is swear an oath to say that you are who you say you are, that you're voting correctly at the right polling location. And then I, as the poll worker, will write your name on the back of the ballot. I will write my name on the back of the ballot and give you your ballot, and you get to vote. So you do go through the process. And the only way that gets challenged or that gets counted, it gets counted like a regular ballot, but the only way it gets challenged is if there's a recount. Because it gets counted through the machine and the vote gets cast as a regular vote.
Does that happen all that often?
I can say that in the past, I've been working in the election office more recently since 2004. It hasn't happened once. I haven't seen a challenge ballot here locally. I know nationally in 2012, there was a big push to have election observers challenge ballots. Southern states, I think there was a push in Pennsylvania to have that happen. I think that was more of a deterrent for people. Certain parties were using that as a deterrent for voters versus as a simple, measure to check whether or not a voter was actually duly voting.
Again, you said, I'm more worried about the low voter turnout. I want to encourage people. I want to make them know it's easy to register and to get out and vote. That's what you and your staff are all about to a great degree.
That is. I mean, that's something that we've changed over the past, I would say, 6 years. We have made it our business not to be a stagnant office that just sits in City Hall and waits for the voters to come to us. We have march and parades. We go to, colleges and high schools, PTO meetings. We are wherever, we're wanted and we're accepted so that we can make the face of the election office kind of be the face of the people. We're here to help you and to inform you about what it is to run for office, what it is to actually be involved in local politics, because, that's what drives us. What drives the city, what makes the city a better city. And I think if anything that's coming from this conversation that on voter fraud and about voter ID is that more people are having the dialogue, they're becoming informed. Just the average everyday citizen who's not a political person, who's not involved in politics, they want to know because they're concerned that it might affect them.
Well, Gladys Oyola, Springfield Election Commissioner, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.